Welcome, traveler, to a place where the veil between reality and nightmare grows thin. Here, in the shadows, the unknown whispers, waiting for those who dare to listen. Each tale is a doorway into the eerie, the unsettling, and the unspeakable. Dim the lights, silence the world around you, and prepare to step into the darkness. Let's begin the story. The Watchers in the Woods. Luke had always dreamt of being a forester, imagining a peaceful life in the great outdoors. He pictured himself sitting among the trees, sharing joints with fellow free spirits, and occasionally swinging an axe when the mood struck. The reality, however, was far from his daydreams. Forestry was relentless. 6 days a week he labored with the local tree surgery company, feeling the ache in every muscle. But he endured it, knowing that each penny saved brought him closer to his dream of Canada. Nestled deep in the woodlands of North Wales, Luke's cabin was a relic from his late parents. The land surrounding it was mostly thick forest, except for a wide clearing where he often spent time with his best friend, Jason, and his eccentric uncle, Mike. They'd gather around a roaring fire, smoke doobies into the late hours, and talk about life, dreams, and the unknown. The woods had their mysteries, but the trio had always felt a strange affinity for them, until things began to change. One summer night, the sky put on a show none of them would forget. As they lay in the clearing, lost in a haze of contentment, Jason pointed upwards. "That star, it's moving." Luke squinted. At first he thought it was just a trick of the eyes, maybe a passing satellite. But it wasn't moving in a straight line. It zigzagged, darting back and forth with unnatural speed. Then another appeared, mirroring its movements. Soon a half-dozen of them were whirling, looping across the sky, locked in a dance that defied all logic. The three men watched in stunned silence, their buzz completely sobered by the phenomenon. "Aliens, man," Jason finally murmured. Luke swallowed hard. He didn't want to believe it, but what else could it be? Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights merged into one and shot off into the void, disappearing without a trace. That night, none of them spoke much after that. They simply watched the fire burn down to embers, glancing uneasily at the sky. The night the woman took her life changed everything. Luke had come home after a grueling day, ready to collapse, only to find a commotion near the edge of his land. A local woman, troubled and lost in her despair, had chosen one of his trees as her final resting place. The villagers had tried to keep it from him, not wanting to taint his home with the tragedy. But the truth came out, as it always does. Something shifted after that. At first it was just a feeling, the sensation of being watched as the sun dipped below the tree line. Then the noises started, heavy footsteps circling the cabin, scraping at the door. Mr. Moss, his faithful Jack Russell, growled low in his throat, hackles raised. Whatever it was big, too big. Luke had slammed his fist against the door, yelling to scare it off. But the thing never showed itself. Morning revealed deep scratch marks on the wood, too high for any animal Luke knew. His first instinct was a prank, but who would go through that kind of effort? The tree where the woman had died was felled. Luke and his brother Joey cut it into logs, stacking them neatly outside the cabin. He had hoped that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The presence lingered. Days were fine. The woods felt as they always had, calm, welcoming even. But when night fell, the air changed. The silence grew too deep, pressing against his ears like a weight. Shadows stretched too far. Jason and Uncle Mike stopped staying over as much. "It just feels off," Jason admitted one evening. Luke couldn't argue. Then came the whispers, soft, barely audible. Not words, just the faintest murmur carried by the wind. He'd strained to hear them, trying to convince himself it was the rustling of leaves or the distant call of an animal. But deep down, he knew better. One night, he woke to Mr. Moss barking wildly, standing on the bed and snarling at the door. The scratching had returned, slow and deliberate. Luke grabbed his axe, heart hammering, and threw the door open. Nothing. But the logs from the felled tree had been scattered across the clearing. Some were stacked, impossibly balanced into a crude, almost humanoid shape. The next day, Luke made a decision. He wasn't going to live in fear. If something wanted to haunt his land, fine. But it wouldn't own him. With Jason and Uncle Mike's help, he gathered the logs and built a fire in the clearing. The wood crackled and spat as the flames consumed it. "Feels like the right thing to do," Mike mused, watching the embers float into the sky. That night, the woods were silent. Not eerie, just still, peaceful. Luke didn't hear the whispers again. He stayed in his cabin, worked his long shifts, and saved his money. The woods, once menacing, felt like home again. By the time he left for Canada, he did so with a sense of closure. The land had given him so much: shelter, memories, even fear. But it had also taught him resilience. As the plane took off, he looked out at the clouds and smiled. Whatever had been watching him in those woods had finally let him go. If you survived this tale, prove your courage. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because in this world, the next horror is never far away. Until next time, keep your lights low and your doors locked.